CTU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 19, Becoming Real. And now, your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
All right, so welcome, friends. I'm Cynthia Alice here in the studios with my awesome producer.
Hey, this is Dave Croft. What's happening, everybody?
818 Studios.
Yeah.
We're happy to be here, and I'm happy to be bringing you the show. It's pretty much me flying solo today, and this is show 19, and the title of the show is Becoming Real. Becoming Real, and it's something I talk around the edges of often, but I'm really looking forward to the opportunity of going a little bit deeper with it today with you on the air. And again, welcome back. As always, this show is about the authentic spiritual journey, which very simply means that every show we're going to share a learning, and the good news and the bad news, it's often my learning. Sometimes Dave will chime in with his learning or a particular guest, but today it's all me, and I'm looking forward to that, and I also am excited about the guests that are going to be coming forward later this month that you're really going to be blessed with as well. So welcome back to the show. Again, show 19, Becoming Real, and these are spiritual conversations, although mostly today it's a little bit of a one-way conversation, but I feel as if we are talking with one another as you listen, that we are connected, we are one in God, and that as I share my journey, you will connect with it, because in fact, it's your journey too. So we welcome you back to join us for that. I'm just coming off a silent retreat. I was gone for about, I was gone for about 4 days. Not totally silent all 3 days, but mostly.
What parts weren't silent?
Well, I did an unexpected little trip to see my 91-year-old mother,
Aw.
and that felt just perfect to do in the middle of my silence. I was really guided to do it, and it also gave me a different kind of processing time as I drove. So anyway, that was good.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was good. And coming up in a couple weeks, I'm going to do a whole nother day of silence as well. And really, what I'm bringing today to the show is largely a result of some of the work I was doing while I was away. I decided to talk about it because it is very fresh. I mean, you couldn't get much fresher than this material. And I feel strongly about it because it really came in and through my soul when I was doing deeper soul work. So today, Becoming Real is really about doing the deeper work of the soul. And as much as we talk about soul work, and as much as I mention during Sunday morning messages or even in my classes about doing soul work, some people might be saying, well, what is it? Especially people who are not a part of our spiritual community. So soul work means that I look at whatever's happening in my life. I look at my relationships. I look at my reactions, my internal reactions. What are my outward actions? Because my internal reactions could be very different from my outward actions. And then we work with that. What's coming up that needs healing? What's coming up that needs our attention? What are those things that are appearing as roadblocks? What are those things that are repetitive as they come up? Another way to think of that is, what are those patterns, that come up? So Becoming Real is, this whole topic is really based on a quote from the Velveteen Rabbit. And I want to read it to you, but I don't have it right here. Dave's going to make that happen in just a second for me. I forgot to get it ready. Oops.
Well, give me that quote again.
Okay, so it's the Velveteen Rabbit and the Skin Horse about becoming real. And I quoted in my book, 7 Spiritual Laws of Release, and maybe I'm still blissed out from my trip, or maybe it was that I had to replace a car battery on the way here. I don't know. It's been a weird day.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I have it right here. Is it the quote by Marjorie Williams Bianco? That
Yes.
Velveteen Rabbit?
Yes.
Okay. Real isn't how you are made, said the Skin Horse. It's a thing that happens to you. Or a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, Then you become real. You want me to continue on?
Yes.
Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you are real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up? He asked, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't happen often to people who break easily or have sharp edges or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you are real, most of your hair has been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all because once you are real, you can't be ugly. Except to people who don't understand.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Yes. Except to people who don't understand. So we're bringing this quote to you today. And I have a long, long history, by the way, with that particular story, which I'm feeling guided to share. So I will. When I was a kid, I had a sibling who was either in a lot of shows, as an actor, or was a musician playing the shows. And the particular show I'm thinking of now was the Velveteen Rabbit, and my brother actually played the rabbit. And so, as a good Southern sister, I went to every single one of the performances. So I learned a lot of shows. I'll be always grateful for all the shows I went to. I mean, and several of my siblings were in as well. I mean, I've probably seen Fiddler on the Roof. I've been in it or seen it or played in the orchestra or conducted part of it at least 10 or 15 times. But this particular show, Velveteen Rabbit, was one that my brother was in. And so I saw it I saw it many, many times. And the show was filled with incredible wise quotes, especially from the Skin Horse. And I got to say, Dave, your voice was perfect.
Yeah, I went into audiobook mode there.
Yeah. And I'll never forget the man
that.
also who played the Skin
Wow.
Horse, and it's really a story about becoming. And so, really, today's title could be called "On Becoming," and I could do a 6-month series on that very topic because it is such a large idea in terms of how we think about how I teach, I should say, the spiritual journey. Many of us believe that when we begin the spiritual journey, that there's going to be a point where we make it, that somehow we're going to figure it all out. Life is going to be a return to the Garden of Eden. It's going to be this utopian reality. And many, many people feel like they failed spiritually, like maybe they're doing it wrong if they don't reach that. And the truth is, that's an erroneous idea that they're somehow making it. I mean, there are points on the spiritual journey where we feel courageous, where we feel victorious, even that we've overcome something. We have even what I would call mountaintop experiences, like, oh my gosh, yes, what an incredible spiritual experience. But what we also know is after the experience, we land back home, back in reality, and life moves on again. And so, how do we then bring that spiritual experience back into everyday life? So, rather than trying to make the spiritual journey perfect or trying to do it perfectly, what we really seek to do is do it authentically. And that's what I mean by becoming real, is that we are always in a process of becoming, which means becoming aware of our true, authentic self. And so many of us have wounds. Well, I will say all of us have wounds from childhood, and those wounds tend to really inform everyday relationships, our work relationships, our romantic relationships, even the way we treat people at the store, when we shop, the way we drive, that how we learn to relate, usually in our family of origin. This is how we take it through life as this. It's like we're living from this invisible blueprint. It runs like a thread through every aspect of our lives, and most of us can't see, most of us, in fact all of us, unless we do soul work, are not able to see it. So in other words, we are largely living unconscious lives because we don't even know what's running our show. So I hope this is making sense to people as I'm saying it. Dave, give me a head nod.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So so I wanted to talk about this because I've been in really deep soul work. It seems like I say that every few months, and I just don't give up on the soul work. And I'm at the same time that I'm moving forward, and I'm very happy to do that. It's the hardest thing I've ever done to do the work of the soul because I'm always learning more about more unconscious aspects of myself. I'm always seeing places where maybe I've is the word subverted my own growth. I see places where I've hurt people I care about, and so and part of the reason I see that is because I keep taking time away to do the deeper work, and I know as I do it that I'm gonna come into more of my own truth as a soul. In other words, I come into my Christed nature. But I don't want to over spiritualize it because the truth is, I'm becoming a good human. And then the spiritual work is my practice around that. But what we deem soul work is really learning how to be human in this world, and then taking that humanness and transmuting and transcending the difficult aspects of life through a higher awareness. And we do that through self-knowledge. So, yes, we have to know God. And I talk so much about prayer and about meditation and the study of spiritual things. But the most important aspect, really, of the spiritual work is know thyself. Over the temple at Delphi, know thyself. And we should probably put that. And if many of you know, I love the movie The Matrix, which the story of Neo is his, becoming the one. And of course, his name Neo, when it's unscrambled, is one.
One, right.
Yeah. It's also Eon, but that's a whole nother idea about that name. So, so we are all, every one of us are in a process of becoming. And the reason I called it Becoming Real is that most of us in our culture today are super addicted to looking good. If I were in church, I would say, can I have an amen?
Amen.
Amen. Come on.
I'll give you an amen.
Come on, bring it. Bring it. Now, in the old days in the South, somebody would say, make it plain. Make it plain.
I don't think I've heard that before.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Say it, Dave.
Make it plain.
Yeah.
Make it plain.
Bring it. Bring it. So the addiction to looking good, and I want to talk about that because everybody wants to look good. I mean, ministers are classic for this, because ministers, which I am, ministers can never get mad. Ministers can never have an opinion other than, oh, isn't that wonderful? Thank you for giving me a 12 by 12 foot latch hook picture of a rooster for Christmas. Isn't that wonderful? The only answer a minister can have is, isn't that wonderful? And be all love.
Yeah, and you can never have a bad day.
And I can never have a bad day, right?
You can never get angry. You
No,
can
I
never.
can
You
never
have
get
to
angry.
have a endless well of patience,
Right.
and compassion, and
Well,
yeah.
But of course, all of us ultimately want to look good because, hey, we're on planet Earth, and everybody's like, hey, I want a nice this, I want a nice that.
Even today, talking about this episode, I was asked, "Am I going to be on camera?"
Yes.
Because I'm. You don't get to see me, listener, but I'm like wearing a Chargers shirt and some shorts.
Right, and I said it's all me today.
That's right. So
Solo,
so
baby.
I don't have to look good. I can look like a slob. I can look like a '90s
Because
Gen X
Dave doesn't
slob.
care what I think, is what he's telling you.
But I care what you think, listener. So I would have put on a nice shirt if I was on camera today.
Well, yes. And the other reason to put on a nice shirt is just out of respect for the listeners. It's not necessarily about looking good.
Right.
But yes, the idea is we don't want somebody to think negative of us, and so it's important to know that that's a subtext of so much of what we do, because this addiction to looking good really drives a lot of us. It drives us to buy things we can't afford. It drives us to tell stories that are not true. It drives us to have friends that might be a certain status. It might even drive us to have certain jobs. When I'm say driving us, I'm meaning motivating us. So again, friends, and I say that word with a lot of love, friends, all of us in the U.S. are in this addiction to looking good. We're steeped in it in our culture. So again, we want to be aware of it simply so that we can start to pull out of that. Nothing wrong with looking good. Everybody wants to look nice. Again, there's wonderful ways to show up. And when you are doing something special, it's wonderful to look like you care about it. And so, there's nothing wrong with looking good. What we don't want is the addiction to looking good at the expense of our soul. That we will do anything to look good when our inner lives are a mess. And so I want to just bring that up into consciousness so that we can, give some thought to it, so that we can bring some awareness into the work we are doing. It's like, oh, I wonder why I just said that. I found myself one time in a message saying something, and later a congregant said something to me about it. Like, I think that was a lot of ego, she said. And I was like, oh, yeah. And I said,
Oh.
maybe it was.
Oh, yeah.
Like, maybe I said that because I was trying to look good. So I just own that in front of God and everybody right here, right now. And I couldn't respond badly. She was very ill. And so in her illness, she told me that. And I thought, okay, I need to pay attention to this. Here's somebody without a lot of life energy who's taking the time to point this out to me. I need to listen to this. And in that moment, I had a choice with her. Do I defend it, or is she right? And I said, well, I will certainly. Well, the first thing I said was, oh my goodness, because I didn't know what to say. And then the more I talked with her, I said, oh wow, you know what? Maybe you're right. And gee, okay. So I was in the ego, and it was something I said totally unconsciously to look good. So we all have that. And my perspective in terms of being on the platform is it's like I'm helping people live better lives by giving them a story. And so what I had done was link myself with somebody, I don't know, let's say important in the eyes of the world, an author or something like that. And, I guess I thought that gave me more credibility. So what was really going on is I thought I did not have enough credibility on my own. And so if I could link with somebody else, well, then maybe I'd look good. So I'm saying all of this, friends, to share my process and to have you think, okay, what is motivating you at times? And we want to be real. So the idea is if we see things like that, we acknowledge them, we take responsibility, and then, yes, we forgive ourselves and then make amends wherever needed, and then we move forward. So I often say move forward, but there's other work to be done before we move forward. For instance, if I notice I'm really in this addiction to looking good, I need to stop and I need to do some inner work, meaning I might journal a little bit about how I was feeling at the time. And then I might come back to that journaling and see if I see any more. So the soul work means I'm paying attention, I am aware, I'm living my journey authentically, which means I know I'm not doing it perfect because there is no perfect. But the closest thing to perfect is acknowledging when you've done it wrong, acknowledging when you're in your addiction, and then cleaning that up. So that's, for me personally, that's a really important part of my journey and my history. So the addiction to looking good, we just want to be, really aware of that. And ultimately, to move into being more real from the soul level, we ultimately have to release attachment to what we've known, right? We have to, in other words, what we've known about ourselves. In other words, how we even think about who we are in the world, which is, again, each of these kind of points I'm bringing up today could be whole shows in and of themselves, and they may be in the future. But I was so guided to bring you this because in some of my journaling work and where I stayed on my retreat, I was able to sit out on a dock and really just be right on this body of water. And in the morning, it was so beautiful as the that mist would come up. That to me, that's God right there in action, and I love that. And it was so peaceful, and there were so many birds, and I just really got to have a reconnection with nature, which reminded me who I was. And then I was able to journal through some stuff and see, oh my gosh, I really need to release this old part of myself because it's not serving me any longer. So that's what I'm meaning when I say we need to release attachment to what we've known. And it's really, I said it in my book, Seven Spiritual Laws of Release, that we need to release our residual self-image. And that is also a borrow from the Matrix, because Neo had this residual self-image. In other words, there was a way he viewed himself, even though he was no longer that way, that the mental image of himself was still the same. And so to become more real, we have to release out of that old way that we're seeing ourselves. And that's tough work. Say it with me, Dave. That's tough work.
That's that, especially if it's one thing in the Matrix. Neo looked a certain way, and he had hair, and he looked like a normal guy, and so his self image was, I would say, a more positive self image than what was real in the real world. However,
Yes.
that gets really really dangerous if your residual self image is of failure, or let's say like somebody with an eating disorder, anorexia. They look in the mirror and their residual self-image is that they're overweight, and so they're going to damage themselves because their residual self-image is
Yes.
that of failure.
Well, yes, and it's rooted. This goes back to so much of what Cassandra and I did in a couple shows, where it really goes back to the wounds of childhood, and many of us are still living those wounds today. Let me say this: many of us, including me, are still living some of those wounds as if they're happening right now. Right? So, I mean, that's the piece of being real, of just saying that out loud. You see, when people know I'm a minister, they think, oh, she's up front and she's got it all together. And often people put me on a pedestal. And it's happened many times as people get to know me well, especially people that know me very well. They go, oh, wow, she's a normal person. And then they go, oh, well, you know what? I don't think I'm going to listen to her anymore because she's not perfect. And I go, okay, you get to have that.
All right.
Right. But my process for me, and I really honor it and acknowledge it, and in all of you as well, it really doesn't matter to me ultimately the way people react to the kind of work I do and when they find out I'm human, because I am human and I am going to be human and I am going to make mistakes. But what I will do is I will clean them up. I will take responsibility, and I will do forgiveness work as well. So I want to bring this to you today, friends, to just think about, again, releasing attachment to what you've known and even how you've thought about yourself. And we'll do a little bit more of this as we come back right after this message.
We'll return to the program in just a few moments, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. Christ Church Unity is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. CCU Orlando is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We would also like to extend our thanks to our podcast partner, Aikens Counseling Center. Cassandra Aikens is a licensed mental health counselor dedicated to creating sacred space where clients can explore their own inner process in a safe, non-judgmental, and supportive environment. She works with individuals, couples, and groups who are seeking to live a more authentic life. Aikens Counseling Center is located in Winter Park, Florida, and can be found on the web at CassandraAikens.com. We now return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey.
So welcome back. At the break, Dave and I were just talking about coffee is my comfort food.
I think Juan Valdez's donkey is my spirit animal.
Nice. Oh my gosh, I just had this huge thing about my spirit animal. Thank you for bringing that
You're
up.
welcome. Do you remember the Juan Valdez commercial?
Of
Like
course,
they're
are you
drinking
kidding?
coffee and then hey, bro, there's a guy in the
I
window.
wanted to know Juan Valdez,
Yeah.
actually. Well, we in our house, it didn't matter what was going on. Coffee was always the answer.
Yes. Yes. Coffee
And
is always the answer.
yeah, and my dad had a business in the house. It was illegal, but my dad had a business in the house, and people would come to the house, and customers would wait. And at Christmas time, I remember my mom in one day made 16 pots of coffee.
Oh my gosh.
So we always had coffee brewing, and because there were so many of us kids, we would always be at holidays. We'd be standing in line at the coffee pot talking.
So how old were you when you first started drinking coffee?
5.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Oh my
5 years
gosh.
old. 5 years old when I started drinking coffee. It was in a little Dimitas though, and it was half milk and sugar. And the way my family started drinking really strong coffee was that my grandfather had been a missionary in Brazil, and they drink these tiny little cups. It's like a kind of like a cafe cubano, where it's basically a shot of espresso and sugar and yum.
And a shot of espresso with whipped cream, if you had that. It's called
Yeah.
a campana.
Yeah, yes, a campana, yes.
That's the business.
Yeah,
right there.
that's the stuff, man. Light
So
me
welcome
up.
back to episode 19 of Coffee Talk with
Yeah, sorry.
Allison
You
Day.
shouldn't. Let's do a whole show on coffee. Maybe we'll do that because Dave and I love coffee, but we like different roasts. And
I don't
that's-
know. You
Well-
seem to like what I
Well,
what
I've
I-
been yes. We'll save that for the coffee show.
So you
So-
have not been real to me. You're becoming real to me now by saying you don't like my coffee. Now
I
you're
lo-
finally being authentic with me. Finally. It took 19 shows, but
Here we are, finally becoming
live
real.
on the air having this discussion.
Well,
Anyway.
welcome back. We have to have points of lightness. And in the spiritual work, I really want to encourage you, friends, to play more, because you really need to have fun as you do this work. It can get arduous. That's one of the things I took away from my weekend, actually, was play more. And I will just go ahead and speak into that, because when we're living from our wounded spots, it means that we're living from a wounded inner child, and we want to live from our adult, if we're in fact adults listening to this, and mostly there are. Although my son, who's 11 years old, listens to it, but if we are in our wounded, if we're in a wounded child mode, meaning the trauma, and that trauma is running our life because we haven't looked at it, and even if we have, it's still probably to some degree running our life. That it's really important that we pull back from that at times. It's really important that we can get a right perspective, I guess I should say. So let me back up and say it this way. When you're living out your life on planet Earth, and you're living from your wounded child rather than your spiritual essence, you're going to have problems. We've all seen it. We've all done it, because it's part of the human experience. Now, when we move into more healing, which of course why we do all this soul work is that we have moments of healing. And the reason we do that is so then we don't have to live from those places, and life gets to be fun. Life gets to be joy-filled. Life gets to be on purpose. You don't get triggered as often. So the idea is the work gets to be fun, but if we're living from our wounded child, that can't happen. So what we want to do is, as we do the healing work by whatever mode we choose, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that as we do this inner child work, rather than our child trying to run an adult life, which in fact is what we're doing and we know doesn't work well, then our inner child gets to go play, which is what kids are supposed to do, and the adult us gets to run our lives. That's where we all want to be. That is when we can really work from our spiritual essence. Now, there's so many things I want to say right now. One is, I said at the beginning that we have this idea that there's this utopian reality, right? Well, becoming real is the spiritual experience. It is the spiritual journey. So the blissed out moments are a part of it, but they're not the only part of it. they are an important aspect because, again, that's where the healing, that's where the energy to move forward, that's where the support for the journey comes in, these mountaintop experiences, these spiritual experiences you may be having. But the real work is when you're journaling, is when you cry your eyes out because you see a part of yourself you didn't know was there and you commit to healing it. So that is the real work of the soul. Again, we do it so that we can free this inner child that is stuck, as if this trauma is still happening. And again, if you haven't heard the shows before this one about past lives, I think the name of those shows were Who You Were, that I co-hosted with Cassandra. I want to encourage you to go back and listen to those because it touches on this very thing, that as long as we're living from our wound, we're living as if let's say, and I'm almost 50 years old, so let's say I'm living a childhood wound over and over and over and over as if it's still happening. So when that happens, if life sends me something unexpected and I'm living from an old childhood wound, I respond to it like a 7 or 8-year-old rather than an almost 50-year-old. Well, as I said, you can imagine that doesn't go well. So when that happens, I have to pull back all my projection of what I think is happening, and then I go within and do my work around it, right? So that's what I mean about the spiritual work. And the work you do around it is how you start becoming real. You admit there's a problem. You admit that that's the first step in recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? I admitted I was powerless over alcohol, right? So you admit that the fact is, you don't know how to deal with this childhood issue. And then sometimes you journal about, what happened in the situation. You may need to go and get therapeutic help. You may need a therapist. You may need to do a very specific kind of therapy. You may need a past life regression. You may need to do a kind of therapy that involves the body. You may need to do a breath work. You may need to do yoga and engage the body in your spiritual practice. So I started out saying we're becoming real. We're interested in seeking to become more real and authentic in our journey. I said that we are addicted to looking good, and we want to move out of that, and then we want to release attachment to what we've known, meaning our residual self-image or our old view of ourselves. And again, I want to mention that I do talk about that in the 7 spiritual laws. I want to put that in the show notes because I do talk a lot about that in the book. But the third important thing I want to say is that we really want to move into more trust of our own soul and our own soul's process. I am still amazed at how Spirit will show up for me and for others as we learn to trust our soul journey. So I want you to just breathe into that idea that I trust my own soul journey. And I know that my soul journey is going to look different from yours, different from the people I love. Especially, when we have children, we want our children to have, incredible lives, and we tend to project our journey onto theirs. And it's never going to be that. It's never going to be that. So we want to focus on our own journey and see, as you begin to do deeper work, as you begin to journal, as you begin to talk through some of these areas of pain or those areas that are difficult for you, you will learn rather, to trust your soul at a deeper level. You will see how when you've moved forward in listening to your inner guidance, that what things have come forward for you. And I'll give you this example. This is kind of a simple example, but it was a way that I felt supported by the universe. And I was explaining to Dave, and maybe I even said a little bit on the air that on the show that when I was on my trip, I started having a problem with my truck and the battery, and I was really guided just to come home. And as soon as I came home, I had a couple of commitments, and I planned it that way. I knew I was going to come in and have a show to record and things. But then when this battery thing came up on my truck, it was something unexpected. And so I said, okay, I'm coming off silence rather than reacting or feeling the stress. And friends, when I feel stress, I can feel it in my whole upper body. It's like, oh my goodness, I start, my breathing becomes shallow. start being more reactive to things, even in my own mind. And I have to really work with that. So I was saying, okay, all right, Spirit, I've just done all this silence. I've been doing all the spiritual work. I've cried my eyes out every day. I've meditated. I've sang. I've journaled. I've reconnected with nature in a huge way. Certainly, I can trust you on this. I will go wherever you guide. And when I'd pass an exit, I would say, Spirit, is this the exit? Nope. And so that happened all the way home from my retreat. And as I got into Orlando, well, it was about an hour out, and I was really guided to call a place that's actually really near the church. So I called. I said, can you do my truck? I told them what was going on. Absolutely. We'll get you in and out of here. And I felt so supported by the universe. I got in. The guy was nice. He gave me a great price. He did what I needed. I have to come back for other stuff, but he did what I absolutely had to have today. I had already been, and then I needed to eat. And so as I sat down and they were working on my vehicle, I said, okay, Spirit, what am I supposed to do for lunch? Because I feel jammed. I don't know how I'm going to have time to eat. I got a divine idea of where to go. I ordered online. I walked in and picked it up and was ready for my appointment that I had to have. That was, a busy time. So I'm saying all this that these are life circumstances. And these are simple things, but they're ways that we can get off track if we go to the wounded self rather than our spiritual essence, right? And we can more easily go to our spiritual essence when we know what's there. What are we dealing with on the human level? Many of us try to bypass whatever the human level is, and rather than bypass it, I'm suggesting that we go directly into that to see what's there, that we go directly into what the difficulty may be, that we go directly into those feelings of discomfort, that we go directly into the anxiety and the fear. And then as we do that, we can discern what our next steps may be. And it is not common, I've learned, to trust your own soul. Most of our spiritual leaders of the day are telling us to do what they say. Politicians say to do what they say. Advertisers tell us to need what they tell us that we need. And the fact is, you can trust your own soul. And that is so, so important for us to do, and to really honor and acknowledge that it is you and only you that is responsible for your soul's journey. We can't blame past ministers on it. We can't blame our family about it, because you know what? Now, if we're adults listening to this, and even if we're children, ultimately, we are responsible for our own soul's journey. Ultimately, we are responsible. And as we do it, we can really learn to trust our very own soul, right? So I want to encourage you, friends, trust your soul. I want to just let that sink in for a moment, that you can trust your own soul. I've never given space on a show in that way, and I realized I said a lot, and I wanted you to be able to take that in. And I want to say a little more about you getting the right support for the journey as well. Before I do that, there are a couple songs. We're going to put them in the show notes. And there are a couple of artists that I always come back to, singer-songwriters. And I listen to all different kinds of music, classical, rap, jazz, new thought, folk, world music. I listen to everything, Latin, all kinds of stuff, gospel. But there's two songs today. One is by a singer-songwriter, and she's written hundreds of songs. Her name is Karen Taylor Good, and she has an incredible song called Real. And the words partly are, I want to be real. I want to cry when it hurts. I want to feel it all. And that's what we're talking about today. The other song I'll tell you about in a moment, but I want to just finally talk about support for the journey. It's important to me, friends, that you not do this alone, and that you get the proper support when life happens. I've really discovered that so many of us feel isolated in our process, even though we're more connected than ever on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and Snapchat and all the social media sites. But now more than ever in my ministry, I hear stories of depression, of isolation, of hopelessness even. And I want to really encourage you because to take heart, because as you're doing the deeper work, you do need support. It may be that you need to create a network of a few friends. One of the things I often recommend in my classes is to create a support team. And how you create a support team is you call the people closest to you that you feel can support you in a time of need. So these are not most often these are not immediate family members, because often the immediate family members or partners are the ones that are that are difficult in their relationships, even though they love you dearly. It's usually the closest relationships where we find difficulty. So we want to have a list of support people that we can call on, and I would encourage you to find at least 3 people that you can call anytime, day or night. And I would encourage you also to make that list and put it on your fridge at home so that you can come back to it whenever you need. But before you make that list, you need to call each of those people and let them know why you are making the list, and let them know how important it is to you, that how important, number one, that they are to you, how important they are in your lives, and that you want to know, are they willing to be on your support team? And friends, my experience with this has just been phenomenal. Every single person I've talked to has said a resounding yes to being on my support team. And my sense is, if you go about it in the right way, meaning you acknowledge this person in your life, you lift them up and thank them for all the support they've already given you, and let them know you see them as somebody who you can depend on, and can you add them to your list of your prime support people, I would bet that you will get more yeses than nos anyway, as you ask those folks. So I would put, at least 3 on your list, and you could have as many as you want, obviously. But most of us really only have 2, 3 really close friends. If you have a list of 10 or 12 friends, you're not being honest. You don't want that many people knowing your story, but having a few people that you know that could support you in a time of need is really, really important. Again, I also want to mention the possibility of therapeutic work in terms of what you might need. And maybe there's a new kind of therapy you would like to try, and maybe there are therapeutic, what's the word? Modalities that might be new for you that you're really guided to. It may even be coming to a class, or like at our church, we have classes every Wednesday. It might be seeking out a 12-step group if you find yourself in addiction of one type or another, or if you grew up in an addictive household, or a household rather where there was addiction, then you may need one of the meetings like Al-Anon or ACA, or which is Adult Children of Alcoholics, or CODA, which is Codependence Anonymous. So I want to encourage you, friends, to get the support that you need for the journey, because remember, your soul journey is your responsibility. No one can do this for you. And what I've discovered is, as I reach out for support on the journey, if I attend a 12-step meeting, or I reach out to a therapist or friend, then I instantly feel better, even if all they do is listen, or if all they do is say, you know what, I believe in you. Then just sometimes speaking it out loud is support for the journey. So I want to encourage you to do that. Lastly, I want to mention, I said about class, and the other thing I want to mention is at CCU Orlando, we have meditation every Wednesday night at 6:15. And it's a wonderful way to reconnect, to get yourself centered, especially before coming into class at 7. And then you get your midweek lift to take you through the rest of the week until you get back for Sunday. So I want to really encourage that. And then the last thing that's been really important on my journey is calling Silent Unity. And the number for Silent Unity, that'll be in the show notes as well, but I'm going to say it aloud in case you just need to know it right now. It's 1-800-NOW-PRAY. 1-800-NOW-PRAY. And Silent Unity is Unity's 24-hour prayer ministry. It's open 365 days a year, 24/7. Anytime, day or night, that you call Silent Unity, they are there for you. So, friends, there is no reason to be alone in this, and you can get support as you're coming into the journey, as you're becoming more real, as you're acknowledging the places of wounding or hurt, that you can get support as you move through it. So I encourage you to reach out, to receive, to ask for the support that you need, and then accept it again as as that is received. The last song I want to mention is by an incredible folk. He's an incredible guitarist and singer. His name's Jeff Black. Jeff Black, and many people in my family really are fans of Jeff Black. And I got a gift of one of his CDs for a birthday one year from a sister. And the song I'm mentioning specifically today is called Bless My Soul. Bless My Soul by Jeff Black. And it's a beautiful folk tune with he's on guitar and vocals. And I promise you, it'll bless your soul. And anytime I listen to the song Real by Karen Taylor Good or by Jeff Black, and I'm doing real spiritual work, I immediately feel lifted because I feel like there's other people in the world that understand, that support the journey I'm on, and that even are speaking to it through their lyrics and through the lives that they are, intending to live. And this is what we want to do here, friends. We want to support you on the spiritual journey. We know you're doing hard soul work. We know you're digging deep. You're looking into yourself and trying to bring all that goodness into the world. So as you become real, know that we support you too, in thought, in prayer, in consciousness, because we're doing the work with you. So we thank you for joining us today. We do send you our love and blessings and are so happy that you have chosen to share your time with us today. Many blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey presented by CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Dove Borland, Angela Martinez, Peter Gibson, Paul Caswell, and Two Spirits Health Services, along with our partner patrons, CCU Orlando and Aikens Counseling Center. If you would like to help be a part of bringing shows like this and other programs to the channel, please consider becoming a patron. For information, episode show notes, and details about our other shows on the channel, head over to experienceofthesoul.com. And if you enjoyed this program, you can help spread the word by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, or the podcast platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2018 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Shannon Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.